Some stories don't begin with kindness or comfort. Some begin with a slammed door, a raised voice, and words sharp enough to peel the paint off the walls. But the moment he shouted, "Where the hell have you been, USLT?" He didn't know he had just set fire to the very ground beneath his own feet. Because by New Year's Eve a truth was waiting for him that would flip the entire night upside down. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something the elders in my family always said. You don't really know a person until you see what they do when they think they hold power. And honey, tonight I am going to tell you a story that starts in chaos and ends in revelation. A story about dignity, about truth, about a woman who found her voice when someone tried to break it. This is Auntie May speaking now. And baby, pull up a chair. Because this one right here will remind you why nobody should ever underestimate the quiet strength of a woman who has finally had enough. The night everything snapped began with a kind of silence that never stays silent for long, the kind of silence that gathers in the corners of a house right before something heavy and unforgettable breaks loose. She stepped through the doorway with her arms full of grocery bags, her shoulders worn down from the long day that had stretched far beyond what she had planned. Her feet ached, her mind buzzed, her breath trembled a little from the winter air that followed her. Inside she wanted nothing more than to place the bags down, hang up her coat, and breathe like a human being again. Maybe sit on the couch, maybe close her eyes, maybe rest for just 1 second in a space that was supposed to feel like home. But honey, life does not always wait for you to rest. Life sometimes snatches breath right out of your chest before you even know you needed it, and that is exactly what happened the moment the door clicked shut behind her. She had not taken 2 steps into the hallway before she heard the thudding of heavy footsteps rushing toward her like a storm that had been waiting all day to erupt. The quiet she brought in with her died on the spot, replaced by a harsh voice breaking through the air like glass shattering on a stone floor. He came at her with anger swelling in every step, his eyes burning with accusation, his chest puffed up with a kind of fury that had nothing to do with truth. He did not greet her, he did not ask how she was, he did not even look at the grocery bag slowly slipping from her tired hands. Instead he shouted the kind of sentence that stains the walls and stays in the air long after it leaves the mouth where it never should have formed. He yelled, "Where the hell have you been, you slut?" The words did not just fall, they struck with the force of a door slammed in the face of a trusting heart. They struck with the weight of a betrayal she had not even fully uncovered yet. They struck with the sting of disrespect sharpened by a voice that once promised to love her better than anyone had before. She stood still, her whole body froze. She did not gasp, she did not cry, she did not stumble backward. She simply became still in a way that was deeper than shock. It was the stillness of a woman who feels the ground shift under her feet and knows she is about to discover her own power. The grocery bag slid from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull sound. The oranges rolled one way, the bread fell another, and the sound of plastic scraping across the tile floor was the only thing soft in that entire moment. Inside her something cracked, but not in the way he expected. It was not the crack of fear, it was not the crack of guilt, it was not the crack of shame, it was the crack of a dam breaking, the crack of strength rising, the crack of a spirit that had tolerated too much for too long. Auntie May always says you do not have to shout to shake a house. Sometimes the quiet ones shake it harder, and baby, that was the truth standing right there in her living room. She did not yell back, she did not defend herself, she did not meet his rage with rage. She just looked at him with eyes steady and clear as the night sky outside, and that scared him more than any scream ever could. He kept pacing in front of her, kicking the grocery bag aside, hurling accusations that had no roots in reality, throwing insults that bounced off the walls and returned to him like echoes of his own wrongdoings. He tried to get louder, tried to force a reaction, tried to push her into breaking the way he wanted her to break, but she would not give him that. She would not hand over her dignity like that ever again. She watched him the whole time, not with fear but with understanding, because there is a point in every story where a woman realizes she has heard enough, endured enough, accepted enough, and when that moment comes she becomes something different. She becomes clear, she becomes certain, she becomes unstoppable. He kept shouting, but she started to hear other things beneath his voice. She heard panic, she heard guilt, she heard the frantic scrambling of a man who sensed that his lies, his cheating, his secrets were not as hidden as he thought. He accused her because he feared she would accuse him. He insulted her because he could not handle the truths that were about to surface. He tried to shame her because he was drowning in the shame of his own actions. Meanwhile she stayed still like the eye of a hurricane, watching the chaos spin around her but never losing her center. She let him speak until his voice cracked, until his anger wavered, until he realized she was not reacting at all. And when he finally paused, breathing hard, sweating from his own fury, she lifted her head and looked at him fully for the first time that night. That look was not weakness, it was warning. It was the quiet declaration of a woman who had already made a decision long before he finished his rant. Her voice when she finally spoke did not shake, it did not rise, it did not tremble. It was soft but powerful, sharp but calm, gentle but unbreakable. She said, "I will ask you one time to lower your voice." That was it. That one sentence carried more strength than any shout he had thrown at her. It was a boundary, it was a line in the sand, it was the announcement that she was not playing the role he tried to give her anymore. She was not afraid, she was not confused, she was not lost, she was awake. He tried to laugh it off, tried to puff his chest again, tried to regain the power he felt slipping out of his hands, but deep inside he already knew he had gone too far. He saw the shift in her, he saw the strength rising, he saw the clarity in her eyes, and he felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt fear, not fear of her but fear of exposure, fear of truth, fear of losing the control he had depended on for years. But she was not thinking about him anymore, she was thinking about herself. She was thinking about the disrespect she had tolerated, the small lies she had ignored, the big lies she had begun to uncover, the anger she had swallowed, the tears she had dried alone, the love she had given freely only to be repaid with cruelty. She thought about how this home no longer felt like a home, how she could no longer breathe in her own space, how his voice had become the soundtrack of her unhappiness. She thought about the woman she used to be before she dimmed herself to keep the peace, a peace that never truly existed. And in that moment, standing in the middle of her own house with groceries scattered at her feet and insults still lingering in the air, she knew something with absolute certainty. This night was the last night she would ever allow herself to be spoken to that way. This night was the last night she would let someone mistake her silence for weakness. This night was the last night he would ever see her bow her head in pain. She lifted the bags from the floor one by one, slowly, gracefully, with a steadiness that made him step back without even realizing he was moving. She placed them on the counter, wiped her hands on her coat, and stood tall. Her heart was calm, her spirit was steady, her mind was sharp as lightning in the winter sky. He kept watching her, expecting tears, expecting pleading, expecting the same reaction she used to give when he exploded. But those days were over. She was not that woman anymore. She had already stepped into a new place inside herself, a place he could not reach and definitely could not control. He asked her again where she had been, his voice smaller now, weaker now, almost trembling, but she did not answer because she did not owe him answers, not after everything she had discovered, not after everything he had done. Instead, she looked around the room at the pieces of her life that she had carefully built and realized she did not have to stay, she did not have to shrink, she did not have to suffer, she did not have to apologize for existing in her own home. And as she looked back at him, there was no rage in her eyes, only truth, truth sharp enough to slice through every illusion he still clung to. He thought he was in control, but the truth was he had already lost her long before New Year's Eve, and she was about to show him just how wrong he was. The truth hiding behind his rage had been building for weeks, maybe even months, but she could not see it at first because she had been too busy holding together a life that he kept tearing apart piece by piece without ever admitting it. She had been waking up each morning trying to convince herself that the uneasy feeling in her stomach was nothing but exhaustion, trying to explain away the tightness in her chest as stress, trying to ignore the heaviness in her spirit by saying everyone goes through rough patches, but deep down she knew something was off, something was shifting, something in him had changed long before he ever threw those ugly words at her that night. People do not lash out with cruelty unless they have something to hide. That is a truth that Auntie May will take to her grave because she has seen it too many times. A guilty heart never beats quiet, a guilty mind never speaks calm, and a guilty person always tries to paint someone else as the villain before the truth exposes them first. As he raged and stomped and shouted, she stood there and listened, not to his words but to the fear shaking beneath them. There was a panic in his voice, a tremble that had nothing to do with concern for her well-being, a quiver that had nothing to do with love. The more he shouted, the clearer it became. He was not angry that she was late, he was angry that she might have discovered something. He was angry that his lies were starting to unravel. He was angry because his own actions were chasing him faster than he could hide from them. She watched him carefully while he paced back and forth like a man being hunted by his own conscience. His eyes kept darting toward the table where his phone lay face down, as if the screen could explode with truth at any moment. His words spilled out fast and sloppy, like he was trying to drown her in noise before she could speak or ask or question anything. He accused her of things she would never do. He belittled her. He questioned her loyalty. He spit out hurtful names as if cruelty could somehow erase what he had done. But she knew the pattern. She had seen it before in friends, neighbors, co-workers, even in stories passed down through generations. A guilty person will always point the finger first. They will build a wall of accusations, trying to block any path that might lead to their own wrongdoing. They will blame you for shadows they created. They will swear they see things that never happened just so you will not look too closely at the things that did. She remembered the small moments that had been bothering her, the nights he came home late smelling unfamiliar, not like sweat from work but like something he had no business being near, the way his phone had begun to vibrate deeper into the night, the sudden need he had to guard it like a treasure tucked under his pillow or clutched in his hand in the bathroom, the way he took it with him when he stepped outside even just to grab mail, and how he always turned the screen away from her when notifications popped up. Then there were the missing receipts, the unexplained charges, the sudden interest in cologne he had never cared about before, the way he fussed over his appearance before leaving the house even on days when he claimed he was running simple errands. And then there were the lies, little ones, sloppy ones, confused ones, easily proven wrong, yet every time she questioned anything even gently he got defensive, his voice rising, his eyes narrowing, his whole body stiffening like a child caught doing something he should not. All of it had been swirling in her mind, but she kept quiet, not because she was weak but because she knew demanding answers from a man who lives on lies will only bring more lies. She was waiting and watching, holding on to her dignity and gathering her strength because she understood something powerful. There is a difference between reacting with emotion and responding with clarity, and she was done reacting. So when he screamed at her that night, when he hurled the kind of insult no decent man should ever speak to someone he claimed to love, she did not hear heartbreak. She heard confession. She heard guilt screaming to protect itself. She heard fear disguised as anger. She heard a man desperately trying to keep her from uncovering the truth he had hidden so poorly. Every accusation he threw was a mirror reflecting back at him. She saw it clearly now. He wanted to convince her she was unfaithful so he could deflect from his own actions. He wanted to tear her confidence down so she would not have the strength to confront him. He wanted to shock her into silence so she would not ask the questions he did not want to answer. But she did not shrink, she did not break, she did not fall into the trap of defending herself against a lie designed to distract her from the truth. Her silence was not surrender, it was strategy. It was the kind of silence that made him nervous, the kind that made him stumble over his words, the kind that made him glare at her like he expected her to shout back, and when she did not he felt the floor drop beneath him. The more she watched him, the more she realized something else. His anger was not just panic, it was projection. He was projecting his guilt onto her, hoping she would crumble under the weight of words meant to degrade her. If she cried, he would tell himself she was guilty. If she screamed, he would use her emotion as proof. If she begged him to calm down, he would twist it into something else entirely. He wanted her off balance so she would not notice how unsteady he truly was. But baby, her stillness was powerful, her calmness was unsettling, her quiet gaze cut right through the chaos he tried to create. She saw through the cracks in his performance, she saw the fear in his eyes every time his phone buzzed, she saw the guilt in the way he looked away every time she held his gaze, she saw the truth he desperately wanted to hide. And as she stood there, something heavy lifted from her chest, because understanding the truth even when it hurts is lighter than carrying confusion. Understanding the truth even when it breaks your heart is stronger than living in doubt. Understanding the truth even when it changes everything is more freeing than suffocating in lies. She felt clarity pouring into her like cold water, washing away weeks of suspicion. Her stomach no longer twisted because now she knew what it meant. Her chest no longer ached because now she could name the source. Her heart no longer trembled because now she understood she was not losing her mind. His behavior was not her fault. His cruelty was not earned. His accusations were not reflections of her character. They were symptoms of his guilt. He continued his rant, sweating, fidgeting, throwing his arms around like he was acting in front of a crowd, but the more he talked, the more control he lost. She watched him unravel like a thread pulled from a worn-out sweater. His lies could not hold. His anger was cracking. His performance was crumbling under the weight of her calm truth. She saw everything clearly in that moment. The man who stood before her was not the man she had promised forever to. He was a man drowning in his own secrets, pulling her under with him every time he felt himself slipping, but she was not going under with him, not anymore. While he thought he was intimidating her, all he was doing was revealing his own fear. While he thought he was controlling the moment, all he was doing was losing every ounce of respect she had left. While he thought she was falling for his story, she was filing every piece of evidence in her mind like a woman preparing for the day she would walk away with her head held high. She knew then that his anger was not power, it was panic, and panic means the truth is close. Panic means the lies are falling apart. Panic means the mask is slipping. And baby, she was ready to see exactly what that mask had been hiding. Preparing for New Year's Eve was not something she did out of spite, it was something she did out of clarity and purpose, because once a woman sees the truth, once a woman truly understands the shape of the lies around her, she begins to plan with a kind of quiet strength that no fool can stop. She did not scream or throw things or demand answers. She already had her answers. She already knew what he was hiding, what he was denying, what he was pretending did not exist. She did not need his confession because his behavior had confessed for him every day for months. So she moved in silence, and silence can be far more powerful than any confrontation. Silence lets the truth rise to the surface on its own. Silence gives space for clarity to grow. The more she watched him, the more she learned, the more she kept her distance, the clearer the picture became. She noticed everything, every shift, every lie, every odd moment that confirmed what she already knew. She saw the way he clutched his phone as if it were a lifeline. She saw how he flinched when messages lit up his screen. She saw how he ducked into the bathroom for long whispers, thinking she would not notice, the way his voice softened into a tone she had not heard in months. She did not interrupt him, she did not chase him, she let him walk deeper into his own deception, because she understood something most people never learn: you do not have to chase the truth will reveal itself when the time is right. While he lived in fear, she lived in focus. While he scrambled to maintain his web of lies, she gathered her strength like folded fabric ready to be sewn into a new life. She began to trust her instincts again. She stopped doubting her senses. She stopped telling herself she imagined things. She knew she was not wrong. She knew the signs were real, and she began to collect them quietly, piece by piece. She checked their shared accounts and found things that had no explanation. She looked through charges that did not match the stories he had told. She saw late-night rides, dinners, unexplained transactions, all pointing to a world she had not been invited into. She saved screenshots with a steady hand, not to ruin him but to free herself. She took note of times, dates, patterns, all the things he thought she would never be smart enough or brave enough to track. Every discovery gave her more clarity, not heartbreak. This was not a woman falling apart, this was a woman rising from ashes. She was not breaking, she was preparing, and preparation is a kind of power that people who lie can never understand. As December rolled in, the air grew colder, and so did the distance between them, yet he did not notice because he was too busy living in lies to see the truth standing right in front of him. She had started smiling more, but not at him. She smiled because she had a plan. She smiled because she was finding herself again. She smiled because she knew she would not be carrying his disrespect into the new year. She began organizing her life with a precision he had never seen from her before. She contacted the people she trusted. She reached out to family members with warm greetings, talking about plans for the holiday season. She made small notes in a notebook hidden under sweaters on the top shelf, notes about things she needed to take care of, things she needed to move, things she needed to secure. No one noticed the way she moved through those days with purpose, not even him, because he was too distracted with the life he thought he was hiding. She watched him slip deeper into the role of a man who believed he still held control, but control is an illusion easily shattered by the truth. She waited, she observed, she let him dig his own grave with every lie he told and every moment he thought she was blind. She had learned to listen to his silence, because silence often speaks louder than any excuse. New Year's Eve was approaching, and she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She did not want drama, she did not want chaos, she wanted truth laid out plain for all to see. She wanted her freedom, and she wanted it with dignity, not rage. She wanted to end the year not broken but reborn, and she wanted him to know exactly why. So she made plans in a way that looked normal, natural, even festive. She made dinner reservations to his favorite restaurant, not because he deserved it but because she knew the setting would expose the truth with grace rather than destruction. She invited family and friends, the ones who had seen their relationship from the outside, the ones who always wondered why she seemed tired, the ones who had sensed something was wrong long before she had the proof. He thought she was trying to repair things. He thought she had forgiven him. He thought her silence meant she was letting go of suspicion. He thought her gentle tone meant she trusted him again, but he misunderstood everything. He always had misunderstood her because he never took the time to know her heart in the first place. While he rehearsed the image he wanted to show others, she was rehearsing her strength. While he picked out a new outfit thinking the night was for celebration, she was choosing her words carefully for the moment she would reveal the truth. While he arranged his lies, she arranged her freedom. She bought a single new dress, not flashy, not loud, just beautiful in a way that reflected who she truly was, a woman who had survived, a woman who had awakened, a woman who was about to reclaim her power. She tried it on in front of the mirror, and for the first time in a long time she saw herself clearly without the fog of his manipulation. She touched her hair gently, ran her fingers across her cheek and whispered, "I am still here." She breathed deeply and felt peace settle in her chest because she knew she was ready. She organized her evidence carefully, placing it in a small folder tucked inside her bag. She was not trying to humiliate him, she simply wanted truth to stand in the open without fear. She wanted to release herself from the lies that had been weighing her down, and she wanted to do it in a way that showed the strength she had gained through every painful moment. She reviewed messages, screenshots, timestamps, and everything he never thought she would find. She looked at them without tears. There was no heartbreak left in her, only clarity, only purpose, only readiness. He still moved around their home, acting like the king of a castle that was falling apart under his own hands, but she watched him calmly, not with bitterness but with understanding. She realized he had never expected her to be strong enough to leave. He had never expected her to be sharp enough to see the truth. He had never expected her to be brave enough to face him without fear. He did not know her soul could rise like this. He did not know her silence had been her strength. He did not know the woman he thought he controlled had transformed into a woman he could never manipulate again. The day before New Year's Eve, she took a walk alone, wrapped in a warm coat, breathing in the cold winter air. Every step she took felt lighter than the one before. She looked up at the sky and felt something sacred, a quiet confidence, a peaceful finality. She was not walking toward an ending but toward a beginning. She was not running away from pain, she was stepping into her power. She thought about all the years she had given him, all the love she had offered, all the understanding she had tried to share, and she realized something important. She had not failed. She had not broken their trust. She had not destroyed their bond. He had, and knowing that freed her in a way nothing else ever could. She went home, prepared her things, chose her outfit, and placed the folder gently in her purse. She sat on the edge of the bed watching him scroll through his phone, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending he was a good man, pretending he deserved her. She looked at him for a long moment, not with hate but with acceptance that he was who he was and that she no longer had space for that kind of man in her life. New Year's Eve morning arrived, crisp and silent. She woke before him, took a long breath, and smiled because she knew by midnight everything would change. She was ready, she was steady, and she was stronger than she had ever been. When the fourth moment of truth finally arrived, it did not whisper or creep or tap politely at the door. It crashed through every wall, every lie, and every excuse that had been stacked between them for years. It was the kind of moment that does not ask whether you are ready. It does not wait for perfect timing. It simply erupts because the truth eventually grows too large, too heavy, and too sharp to keep contained. That night she felt something shift deep inside her, like a quiet switch flipping in a dark room. She knew she was done shrinking. She was done bending. She was done allowing him to twist her spirit into tight, painful knots that left her breathless and uncertain of her own worth. For years he had relied on her silence. He counted on her fear. He believed she would always swallow his insults and hide his cruelty behind practiced smiles that kept peace for everyone except her. He assumed she would hold everything together because that is what she had always done. But New Year's Eve held a different kind of energy, a fierce kind of clarity that wrapped itself around her like armor. She could feel the decision building in her pulse, in her breath, in the steady rise of her chest as she stood there looking at him. His voice was sharp again, filled with suspicion and venom, yet she did not crumble this time. She simply listened, the way a judge listens before delivering a verdict. She did not tremble. She did not apologize. She did not defend herself. She let him talk because she knew she had something far more powerful waiting inside her, truth. Every insult he hurled landed with less force than the one before. It was as if her spirit had finally grown a shield that his words could not pierce. He accused her of things that were not real. He spun stories that matched his fears rather than her actions. He paced. He shouted. He demanded explanations for sins she had never committed. But she saw something she had never seen so clearly before. His anger was not proof of her guilt. It was proof of his own fractures, his own insecurities, his own fear that he could not control her anymore. The realization washed over her like warm rain. It did not excuse him and it did not soften the damage he had done. But it helped her understand what needed to happen next. The truth was no longer a whisper in her chest. It was a rising tide. Her heart beat with a sense of calling, as if life itself was urging her to step forward into something better. She took one slow breath and lifted her head. She could feel old versions of herself falling away like worn pages that could no longer hold the ink of her story. She was stepping into a new chapter, one that required strength and honesty and a refusal to remain in shadows. She felt the weight of every year she had spent trying to keep peace, and she let that weight drop from her shoulders. He noticed the change in her posture. His voice wavered for the first time. He asked what she thought she was doing. He asked why she was looking at him like that. He asked why she was so quiet. Silence from her had always been the sign he was winning. But tonight her silence held something else. Power, resolve, and a long overdue reckoning. She stepped forward until she stood close enough to look directly into his eyes. She could see the confusion there. The unease. The beginning flicker of fear that something was slipping out of his grasp. She told him she was done living under suspicion. She was done carrying blame that did not belong to her. She was done explaining her every move to someone who treated her like an enemy rather than a partner. She spoke slowly because the truth no longer rushed from her in anxious bursts. It rose with steadiness, with certainty, with a kind of peace that frightened him more than her anger ever could. He tried to interrupt. He tried to twist her words. He tried to shift the blame back onto her shoulders like he always had. But none of it worked anymore. His voice lost strength because he knew she was not bending. Not this time. She had reached a line she would not cross again. She told him she knew about the messages he had sent to someone else. She told him she knew about the nights he claimed to be working late when he was not working at all. She told him she had spent too long protecting a man who was busy destroying the trust she had built with both hands. He froze. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, as if searching for a script he had misplaced. In that silence the room changed. The air grew heavier, yet she felt lighter. She told him she had proof. Not speculation, not suspicion, proof. She described what she had seen, what she had heard, what she had pieced together from his inconsistencies. Every detail was like a torch set to the fabric of his excuses, and she watched him squirm as the truth burned through every corner he had tried to hide in. He stuttered. He reached for explanations that contradicted themselves before they even left his mouth. He tried to shame her for watching him. He tried to accuse her of being dramatic. But she did not react. She let him speak because none of it mattered anymore. She had finally stopped trying to keep the relationship alive by sacrificing her own sense of reality. She knew the truth, and she knew what she needed to do with it. She told him she was leaving. Not tomorrow, not next week, not after one more attempt at saving something that could not be saved. She told him she had already packed the essentials. She had already arranged a place to stay. She had already alerted the people who cared about her and would support her. She watched his face shift from anger to shock to disbelief. He truly never thought she would walk away. He believed he had broken her spirit too thoroughly for her to ever choose herself again. But he was wrong. She felt her voice steady as she said she would not step into a new year carrying an old wound. She would not welcome another January with the same pain. She would not allow him to call her names or accuse her of betrayal while he hid his own. Her heart had endured enough. Her soul had fought enough. And she had finally remembered that survival is not the same as living. She was ready to live. Ready to reclaim her peace. Ready to build a future shaped by her own hands rather than his rage. He reached for her wrist, but she stepped back. She told him not to touch her. She told him she was not his possession. She told him she would not argue or negotiate or revisit this decision. She had made up her mind. She was choosing freedom over fear. Light over darkness, truth over illusion. She turned toward the door with a calm that surprised even her. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She walked with the strength of someone who had spent too long crawling. Behind her he shouted her name, but she kept walking. He demanded she come back, but she kept walking. He promised to change, but she kept walking. She knew the difference between desperation and sincerity. His voice was filled with panic, not remorse. She did not turn around. When she stepped outside, the cold air wrapped around her, yet she felt warmer than she had in years. Fireworks began to burst in the distance, marking the beginning of a new year. She looked up at the sky lit with bright streaks of hope, and she let one truth settle deep in her bones. She had saved herself. She had chosen herself. And she would never again allow anyone to dim the fierce steady light that was finally shining from within her. The fifth turning point rose like a storm on the horizon, not sudden yet impossible to ignore as it drew closer. It carried a weight she could feel in her chest, a pressure that told her life was shifting into something new, something unfamiliar, something she had never allowed herself to imagine before. Walking away had been the first brave step, but what followed required an entirely different kind of courage. It demanded that she face herself without excuses, without distractions, without the noise of someone else tearing down her worth. It required honesty, the kind that looks you in the eye and will not move aside until you confront what you have been avoiding for years. And that night, as she settled into the quiet, safe space she had created for herself, she realized the truth held more layers than the pain she had just escaped. She sat on the small borrowed bed, feeling the silence settle around her like a blanket. For the first time in years, no one yelled her name in anger. No one demanded to know where she had been. No one accused her of sins she did not commit. The absence of chaos was almost disorienting. Her mind waited for the next explosion, the next accusation, the next wave of manipulation. But none came. Instead, she heard something she had almost forgotten. Her own breathing, slow, steady, unbroken. She closed her eyes and felt every beat of her heart. Each one whispered a question she had avoided. Who are you when no one is defining your worth for you? Who are you when no one is watching, waiting, judging? Who are you when you are free? The truth was, she did not know. She had spent so long trying to avoid setting off his temper that she had molded herself around his emotions like clay pressed into the shape someone else demanded. For years she had shrunk to survive. Now she had space. Now she had quiet. Now she was confronted with herself. And she was unsure what she would find. But this moment was necessary because something deep inside her had begun to stir, something that had been dormant for too long. Strength does not appear all at once. It grows slowly, like roots finding their way through hardened soil. And in that small quiet room she felt the first roots pushing through. She wrapped her arms around her own body and allowed the tears that had been building to finally fall. They were not tears of loss. They were tears of release. Tears that cleansed years of tension, pain, and self-doubt that had collected like dust in corners she had forced herself not to see. She cried in a way she had never allowed before. Freely, fully, without apology. And when the tears slowed, she felt lighter. Not healed, not complete, but lighter. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and whispered to herself that she was safe. The words felt fragile at first, like a small flame flickering in wind. But with each repetition they grew stronger. She was safe. She was safe. She was safe. With safety came a new challenge. She had to rebuild, not the life she had with him, but the life she wanted for herself. That required choices, hard ones, bold ones, ones that placed her at the center rather than the edges. She stood up and walked to the mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. The reflection staring back at her was tired, bruised by years of emotional blows, yet still standing. Her eyes carried storms and fire and a depth of resilience no one had ever nurtured. She whispered softly that she was proud of herself for leaving. Those words too felt awkward at first. She was not used to praising herself. But she said them again and again until she believed them. The fifth moment was not just about acknowledging the damage done. It was about reclaiming every piece of herself she had been taught to abandon. She thought about the dreams she once had, dreams she had buried under responsibilities and fear. She had forgotten what she wanted beyond survival. Now she began to remember. She wanted peace. She wanted joy. She wanted connection, not control. She wanted a life where she could breathe without waiting for punishment. She wanted to wake up without fear curling around her ribs like barbed wire. She sat at the small desk and pulled out a notebook. She wrote slowly because the act felt sacred. She wrote what she wanted for her future. She wrote what she refused to accept ever again. She wrote what she deserved, even though part of her still struggled to believe she deserved anything more than the scraps she had been given. But she wrote anyway. She wrote until her hand ached. She wrote until the page filled with hope and promises she intended to keep for herself. As she wrote, she felt something shift inside her. A realization settled gently upon her heart. Healing was not about going back to who she used to be. Healing was about becoming who she was meant to be before the world tried to break her. She felt a spark of determination take root. She would not let her past define her. She would not let his voice echo inside her head forever. She would replace it with her own. A voice that had been buried beneath years of fear yet was rising now, strong, steady, undeniable. When morning came, she stood by the window watching the first light of the new year stretch across the sky. She could feel something inside her awakening. She felt the courage to stand tall. She felt the courage to move forward even if the path ahead was uncertain. She felt the courage to love herself without apology. She hugged herself gently and whispered that she was beginning again. Not because she was broken, but because she deserved a life shaped by her own hands rather than someone else's anger. She thought about the way he had looked at her the night before, the moment he realized she was truly leaving. His face had flickered with disbelief because he had always assumed she needed him to survive. But standing in the soft morning light, she realized she had never needed him. She had needed safety. She had needed peace. She had needed love. He simply convinced her that he was the only place she could find those things. Now she knew he could never offer any of them. She placed her hand over her heart and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time she felt the beginning of hope. Not hope that he would change. Not hope that the past could be rewritten. Hope that her future was finally her own. Hope that she could rebuild from strength, not from fear. Hope that she could step into the world without shrinking. She felt an inner fire growing, a warmth that reached every part of her spirit. This was the fifth turning point. Not the moment she left him. Not the moment she exposed him. Not the moment she confronted him. This was the moment she confronted herself. The moment she accepted that healing would be her responsibility and her gift. The moment she chose her identity over her history. The moment she understood that surviving was no longer enough. She was ready to live. She whispered to herself that the world was still full of beauty and she was still worthy of all of it. She promised to protect her peace fiercely. She promised to love herself deeply. She promised to never again shrink for anyone. And with those promises made, she felt ready for whatever came next. Because she had herself, and for the first time in years that was enough. The sixth turning point rose not as a whisper or a quiet inner shift, but like a full revelation that arrived with the certainty of sunrise. It came when she realized that healing was not just about escaping the storm, but learning how to walk beneath a clear sky without waiting for thunder. She had spent so many years bracing for the next sudden attack, the next cruel word, the next night filled with suspicion and blame, that her body had memorized fear like a familiar melody. But now, standing in a world that finally held silence and safety, she felt the need to unlearn every pattern that had kept her small. Healing required courage. Healing required patience. Healing required her to believe that she deserved more than survival. And on this final step of her journey, she discovered that the greatest battle was not leaving him. It was choosing herself again and again each day, even when doubt tried to creep inside her heart. She woke on her first full morning alone and noticed the sunlight warming her skin. It felt different, somehow gentle. Instead of blinding, she stretched slowly, letting her muscles release years of tension. No one was yelling. No one was demanding explanations. No one was accusing her of betrayal. Her mind was not racing through a list of ways to avoid conflict. Her body was not curled in anticipation of chaos. Instead, she felt an unfamiliar stillness. It was peaceful yet also unsettling, because stillness was something she had forgotten how to trust. She sat up and placed her feet on the floor, grounding herself in this new reality. She whispered softly that she was safe. The words moved through her like a slow warm tide, and she felt her breathing deepen. Safe. That word had been a distant dream for so long. Now it was her truth. She let her hand rest on her heart and felt each beat as if her body was reminding her she was alive in a way she had not been for years. Her thoughts drifted to the people who had watched her suffer. Some had tried to help. Some had turned away. Some had judged her for staying as long as she did. But she no longer carried their opinions like chains around her ankles. She understood now that people only see what their own experience allows them to see. They do not understand the invisible battles, the quiet negotiations, the careful calculations a person makes when they are trying to survive someone who claims to love them while also tearing them apart. She forgave herself for every moment she stayed, because staying did not mean weakness. It meant she fought. It meant she hoped. It meant she gave everything she could until she finally saw the truth. She was not the failure. He was. She made tea in the small borrowed kitchen, letting the steam rise around her face. She closed her eyes and let the warmth soothe her. She thought about all the times she had made tea in her old home, drinking it quickly in silence, hoping he would not start another argument. Now each sip tasted like freedom. She savored it, letting the flavor linger on her tongue. Healing sometimes began with simple things like that. Slow sips, still rooms, simple choices, small joys. They were reminders that life could be gentle. She decided she would take a walk, something she rarely allowed herself while living with him, because even stepping outside without permission had sparked accusations. Now she opened the door and stepped into the cool air, letting it wrap around her like a fresh chapter. She walked without rushing, feeling the earth steady beneath her feet. She noticed the sound of birds calling to each other, the soft wind brushing against her skin, the way sunlight caught on the edges of winter leaves. Every detail felt like a rediscovered part of life she had forgotten existed. As she walked, she allowed her thoughts to wander freely. She did not avoid memories or push away feelings. She let them rise and pass like waves. Some memories hurt deeply, like the night he screamed accusations that were never true, or the morning he refused to let her leave the house until she explained her every movement. Others were memories of how she had tried to fix things, praying that if she just loved harder, if she just stayed quieter, if she just gave more, he would finally see her worth. But that was the lie he had trained her to believe. She had never been the problem. She had simply been the easiest target for his brokenness. She paused by a quiet bench and sat down, letting the cool wood support her. She looked up at the wide sky and felt something loosening inside her. She realized she was not mourning the relationship. She was mourning the version of herself who had suffered for so long. She felt grief for the years she lost, for the dreams she delayed, for the parts of her spirit she abandoned in order to keep peace. But grief was not an enemy. It was a companion guiding her through the rebuilding of her identity. She spoke softly to herself, acknowledging her pain, her strength, her resilience. She told herself she was proud of how far she had come. She told herself she had every right to rest. Healing was not a race. Healing was a journey shaped by the gentle steps she took each day toward wholeness. She knew there would be moments when doubt whispered in her ear, moments when the past replayed in her mind, moments when she questioned whether she had been strong enough or smart enough or brave enough. But she would remind herself that she had survived something that had tried to break her spirit. And surviving had taken unimaginable strength. She walked back to her room with a new sense of clarity. She sat once more at her small desk and opened her notebook. This time she wrote not about the past or the pain, but about her future. She wrote about the life she wanted to build. A life filled with peace, kindness, laughter, creativity, and true connection. She wrote goals that felt far away yet possible. She wrote promises to herself that she would no longer settle for half love or shallow apologies, or someone who fed his ego by tearing her down. She wrote that she would honor the woman she was becoming. As she wrote, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a sense of empowerment that surprised her. She felt like she was reclaiming her story, sentence by sentence, word by word, breath by breath. She realized she had been living in survival mode for so long that she had forgotten the feeling of hope. Now that hope was returning slowly but steadily. It glowed inside her like a small flame, strengthening with each new truth she embraced. Later that evening she stood by the window again, watching the sky turn to soft shades of blue and gold. She reflected on everything she had endured, all the battles she had fought, all the nights she survived alone in fear. And then she placed her hand over the glass, feeling the cold surface beneath her skin, and whispered that she was done merely surviving. She wanted to thrive. She wanted to grow. She wanted to live with fullness rather than fear. The sixth turning point was not a single moment. It was the accumulation of every step she had taken since she walked away. It was the realization that her past did not define her future. It was the decision to forgive herself, to nurture herself, to rebuild herself. It was understanding that healing was not linear, but every step forward counted. It was knowing that she was stronger than anything that had tried to break her. She looked out at the world beyond the window and knew deep in her heart that she was ready. Ready to rise. Ready to rebuild. Ready to reclaim every part of herself she had lost. Ready to step fully into the life she deserved. The life she chose. The life she would create with her own strength, her own voice, her own beauty, her own truth. And as the new year stretched out before her, she felt something powerful settle inside her. A promise, a vow, a truth she would carry forever. She was free, she was whole, and she was never going back.